Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Maria Taiji and the second episode with Linda Ahrgren. We've been talking about RegTech, which is, this regulatory market and what usually companies are facing nowadays, both companies and people, regarding frauds and scams and how to protect. And now on this episode, we're going to try to focus a little more on some of the technologies and the future of this market. So thanks for being with us today, Linda.
Thank you for having me.
So we are reading about blockchain everywhere, in every market, in every industry, as a trend. So it's not really here yet. It's being experimented in, a couple of segments. But when you research about any topic, somehow a blockchain ends up appearing. So do you see that as an ally to the RegTech market, as it's said to enable the automation of record-keeping processes? The input of data can't be changed. There's this distributed ledger, which in theory is ensuring accuracy. So are you on the side of being a believer of that? Or do you think it's just another trendy word that is probably going to change? Or do you see that it's actually going to be applied on a larger scale in the future? What's your side?
I think right now we're actually looking to recruit blockchain talents to our company. So I'm definitely a great believer in that. But at the same time, I think that a lot of people are believers in blockchain because there are quite obvious benefits with it. There are so many companies looking for this talent right now. It's even harder to get like a blockchain specialist than an artificial intelligence specialist or cloud computing or anything. But as you said, it can still be considered to be quite immature, although it's like 10 years or something, but because there has been a lot of pilots. But for example, we are working a lot with the public sector. And there we can see, great benefits when it comes to the security, and it's hard to manipulate the data, etc. But what I kind of feel or experience when I think about, blockchain, it's not that the technology itself will be complicated to implement, but it will be kind of, there has to be like a new mindset of the people or the companies that will implement it, because it's so democratic. Everyone has access to the same amount of data. So in one way, you have to dare to let go of the control. And that is something which I think it has great potential for this democratizing effect, but also most parts of the society today doesn't really look like that. For example, you usually have it's centralized and, the authority is there. So I think this part will be quite challenging, but I'm truly a great believer. I think it will do a lot of good to, for example, working conditions or people, etc. as well. So not only for security.
Awesome. Great to know that you're actually investing our time on researching and trying, right, in implementing that for your company. And talking about your company, right, it specifically works on the e-signatures and e-identification business as well with biometric identification. So what are the challenges and upcoming trends for this sector? So we already mentioned, the blockchain maybe as a trend. So what else could you talk about it?
I think it's a great business to work with because, a lot of companies spend a lot of money on compliance, but we definitely do face challenges. And because there are some, how can I say? Maybe that is called trends. For example, you always have to provide something which is simple and safe. And that is like a hard combination sometimes. And also, you have to provide something for every citizen. So I mean, in this digital world, you use a digital identity to access it. But everyone have to have access to this digital world, to this digital society. And today, maybe not everyone have that. I think this is like a challenge that not everyone have access today. But I can also see that this will change because it's once again the corona. I think the corona with all these I can say, tragic consequences and everything, it has triggered, this need for global coordination, or that we had to be able to monitor. We had to be able to monitor who has been tested, who's been vaccinated, who's recovered, and all these things we have to monitor on a global level. And this has kind of forced us to move forward with, digital identity or digital certificates. So I think that very soon this challenge that not everyone have access to this digital world, that it will change. But that's basically the trend and the challenge, I would say. Providing everyone with a digital identity, which you already can see that European Union citizens very soon can have, and then to do this on a global level.
So do you think, talking about trends, do you think that in the future, and it's just a thought, right? But do you think in the future people will ever need to have passwords at all? Like maybe we're going to get as advanced of using our eyes and fingers to be scanned, and this is going to be more disseminated. We know that it happens already. Your company works with biometrics, right? We see movies about the future that it's just about eyeball scanning and scanning the finger, or maybe even a chip is going to be implemented on us. It's going to be enough somehow to be scanned, and we're going to be able to prove our identity. Thinking about what you said, that one of your main challenges is being inclusive, right? Maybe this is a path of being more inclusive, as everybody would be able to have it, no matter which devices you're using it.
Yes, you're so right, actually, that I think for sure, biometrics will be used even more. I mean, we're pretty bad at using passwords today.
Oh, it's terrible, right?
It's terrible. And at the same time, these security incidents are increasing. So we have to do something about it. So I think we are moving away from passwords. Definitely. And just as you said, the biometrics is there and everyone can access it. And it's quite hard also to lose your finger, right? So it is definitely one of the things that are already here, but will also, be even more developed for the future. I think in Sweden, we used biometrics for the passports, for like 15 years. Then when it comes to, chips and such, there are quite a few people, or teenagers, I would say, here in Sweden that are welcoming. It's their attitude towards it. They are not afraid of it, and they find it very convenient. And I think when it comes to the chip and when it comes to the biometrics, I think also the perception, at least here in Sweden, is that it's much more secure than the password. So I'm 100% sure that we will be password free in no time.
That's such a great news, really. And people that try to be following all the guidelines, it's just impossible. Which password different from another site, unless you have these password managers that are also very scary, because it's just one password to get into the password manager. So we definitely need to change that. But Linda, let's have a complete change in subject right now, because I couldn't end our interview without getting into something you told me before. You shared that you love to work with startup founders. And you told me the following: the worst thing you can do is to get rid of the founder. You can work together side by side. And the reason that caught my attention is so frequently you see VCs firing the founders. And you read a lot of books as well about being an entrepreneur, how you should be planning your way out. And that sometimes you just need to leave your company to a more qualified executive. So there's this belief that this change is needed to drive growth. I did love your point of view, so please share this story with our listeners.
Yeah, maybe it's just my experience, but I think maybe smaller companies, like if you're 30 employees or something like that, maybe you still need these entrepreneurial skills. I mean, if you get rid of the founder, first of all, then you get rid of someone who actually made the company successful this far. And this is like a super smart person, super multifunctional, and very, very action-oriented. So as a resource, it's terrible to get rid of this person. And then when it comes to who's in charge and who's not in charge, I think that the only thing you have to do is basically to pay respect to, what he or she has created, because what I've experienced is that they are quite open to let someone else lead the company when it comes, the practical part. The thing that they find hard is the emotions to the company. They just want to ensure that their baby are being taken care of. So you just have to ensure that you get the respect. And maybe you have to get into learning about all the different functions a bit more. And then also you have to be slightly more action oriented. And then usually you meet the founder and get the respect. And you can add maybe what the founder didn't have in my case. And maybe, they didn't have some structure or strategy or thought about the long run or long term. And you can lead it in your way, but you have to kind of meet the founder, I think, to get that respect. But to let the founder go, then I think you'll get rid of somehow also, the mission of the company. I mean, I've been in so many different groups where, we have discussed what is the mission, what is the vision, but it's usually just, the founder who is the mission. So I think it's quite easy actually to work with a founder if you just try to understand what he or she is going through. And then to ensure that, the responsibilities are clear between the two of you. And then I think you can work side by side and you have the best resource within the company.
So do you have any advice for the founders out there so they don't fall into this trap? And likewise, any advice to the VCs that may be struggling to make this decision? Because, it shouldn't be an easy decision to make, right?
No, I think they can be a bit naive. It sounds so good to take in an external CEO who kind of solves everything, and then to get rid of the founder to ensure that he gets the space to decide. But I just think that maybe if you working with the size of the company, which I mentioned, like 30 people or whatever, then maybe you should look for someone who is slightly closer to, not only working with like structure and strategy and such, but who is slightly more also action oriented, because that usually works better with a founder. So I think that there are that kind of people there, but you just have to ensure that the external CEO is slightly a bit more like the founder than maybe you were thinking about from the beginning.
That's great. Linda, we're getting to the end of the interview. So, before we do, I'd like to go back to the regulations piece. You're such an expert on the subject that I'd like to know if you have also any advices for our listeners, both on the, personal side, but also on the company side of, which would be your main advices regarding protecting themselves against, fraud, identity theft, scams? Any practical advice that you could give our listeners?
I think as a private person, you just have to think that it might happen to you, or maybe even that it will happen to you. That's the first thing. You have to prioritize it. You have to put 30 minutes away to ensure that you actually set up all the tools you need for protecting yourself. But then the second thing, I think, is the awareness and the knowledge. You should read a bit about, about frauds, about phishing, and what that actually is. And that also takes no time. So you can do that also within these 30 minutes. So you can set up everything, with the tools, and you can read about it. And in total, it will be 30 minutes of good investments. Then for businesses, I think once again, to ensure that you provide an environment where your employees can work anywhere. So that means that you have to have this zero trust kind of principle, that you have to show evidence every time you access something important business application or information and such. This is also something which is very important, because that is how your employees are working today, and that is how they will work, although you might set up different rules. then it's all these small practical things, as maybe I mentioned before, you should always think about, not open links or attachments if you don't recognize it, or if the email looks weird also, or the site looks weird, maybe you should do some research before you actually click further. And then for example, myself, I always use Wi-Fi from my phone. I never use Wi-Fi in a coffee shop, for example, if I'm sitting working there, because I'm thinking about that the network security has to be, safe and such. So I think that those are some small tips, but the main thing is to just ensure that you know about what can happen to you and how to prevent yourself. And that is your 30 minutes.
Yeah, basically everybody, please just go get informed, right? Get informed. And I hope my mom is listening to this interview. Okay, Linda, it was so great to have you with us. Do you have any final words? Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I'm just so happy that I had the opportunity to be here to say something about RegTech as a business with you. Thank you.
That was awesome. Really great content. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Future Hacker.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.